The Gold Cup is fast approaching, and we have former USMNT stars, my friends Jimmy, Conrad, and Heath Pearce, who will take you along for the preview as the USMNT look to once again get one over Mexico, who will come out victorious in CONCACAF's Gold Cup. This is our preview. Qué Golazo begins right now.
Thank you so much, Luis. Jimmy, what's going on, man?
What is up?
This is crazy, man.
Oh, this is crazy. I feel like we don't have any parents watching.
Yeah.
There's no teacher here. You know, like, not to say that Luis is keeping us in check, but let's be honest, Luis is keeping us in check. Now we get to be crazy. We're crazy.
Yeah, you know what? I bet he's jealous right now. I know that he handed this off, and then he's thinking, man, I shouldn't have handed this off.
It's like when your parents leave the house for you for the first time. They're going for the weekend.
How's the phrase go when the adults are gone, the kids will play, or something like that? Something in there. I think it's something. I'm close to it, Jimmy.
You're very close, and I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I can't remember it word for word either. So we're gonna have some fun. Ultimately, is what the crux of your messaging is.
Yeah, and for anyone who's still listening, we are doing a Gold Cup preview. I know you come here for Luis and you stay for the Jimmy, but I'm here, Heath Pearce with Jimmy Conrad, Qué Golazo podcast, and we're going to be talking about the Gold Cup preview today. Jimmy, is there anything off the top of your head that kind of rings a bell for you in the Gold Cup? How many Gold Cups did you play in?
I played in 2, one with you.
Okay, yeah.
But I got a concussion, so I didn't play the last 2 games. And I'll let you decide if you want to say what happened.
Hey, listen, I will say it was 0-0 at halftime, if that counts. We tied the first half. But we took a beating against Mexico in the Gold Cup final. One of the worst actual days of my personal career, of knowing that the score will obviously tell a different story than what the game was like, but it's sold out crowd at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. And, I wish that you were playing with us, because it started to fall apart in the second half.
It did.
And for anybody who hasn't heard, when we lost, this is 2009 Gold Cup final, it was like 3-0. I think it was 4-0. I think the final was 5-0.
It was the final was 5-0.
Yeah.
I was up in the stands because I had a concussion. I was up high with John Hackworth, like scouting, looking at different things to give insight to the coaching staff and the players. And it was 0-0 at half. But that 0-0, we were never in control of that game at any point. And yes, it was 95% Mexican fans in the stands. It was sweltering heat. We didn't really stand too much of a chance once the game got going.
They had just laid the pitch as well, by the way. So it was like a
slow.
weird, like the ball didn't bounce when it hit the ground. But anyways, no excuses. I mean, there's a lot.
I gave you plenty of excuses. I gave you plenty of them.
I will say this about which is a funny little story before we get into this preview, is we were down 4-0. And I believe it was Brian Ching or somebody else pulled us all in together after 4-0. Very rarely do you see a huddle at 4-0, and we huddled. And the talk was, don't give up another goal. Just play with pride for the rest of the game. You know what we did? We gave up another goal, Jimmy. It didn't end well. But, it was an incredible experience running into that. And we'll get to some of those Gold Cup stories that you and I both remember as we go through each of the groups, and then we'll talk about some of the players to watch and some of the countries to watch, and any sort of surprising things that you that you want to talk about. I will preface this by the way. Unfortunately, so U.S. plays Haiti in the first game, and the Haitian president was assassinated.
When?
Yesterday.
What?
In his home.
What?
Yeah, and it says that the Brian Scaretta tweeted it out this morning that they'll open up the Gold Cup campaign against Haiti, and there's a national tragedy as the Haitian president Jovenel Moïse was assassinated last night in his home.
Can you play? Is that even like, what do you do there? If our president got assassinated, I'm pretty sure everything was shut down for a little while, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So, I mean, or maybe sports is a way to have a release.
Jimmy, by the way, I'm reading this now, and it was Tuesday that this happened.
What? Where have I been? I'm down in this bubble. All I do is think about the beautiful game. I got to get outside my bubble sometimes. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's we've seen a lot with the Euros. We've seen a lot of this crazy stuff of circumstances and situations that are extremely difficult. And this is another one for Haiti, who just got in, by the way, to the Gold Cup. And so huge national tragedy. but one that they're going to have to deal with. Jimmy, I don't know if you remember in 2009 when we played Haiti and we actually had to score at the end and would have had to play against Mexico in the semifinal. I don't know I think maybe it was Stu Holden scored or who was it?
Stu scored.
Yeah.
Listen, I was captain that game. And the worst thing when you're
Humble brag. Worst thing as captain, huh? The worst thing about being
the worst thing about being the captain is when your team is losing. So I can only imagine how Michael Bradley felt being the captain of us not qualifying for a World Cup. That must have hurt, but it probably still does. When you're losing and you're the captain, you take this added responsibility that maybe I should have said something different. I mean, you're thinking about this stuff in game. Like, how did I let it get to this point? Now, Haiti scored a couple crackers in that game, including one bombasso from 40 yards out or something. That guy hit a bomb. Anyway, Stu Holden did score in the 93rd minute for us to draw 2-2. And that was pretty exciting. But I don't know.
I guess the point I was trying to make with this is that you look on paper, and Group B for the U.S., for example, and we'll start with Group A, but Group B, you have Martinique, USA, Haiti, and Canada, right? You think, you should be a cruise through, but that was a day where there was it's difficult, right? Like sometimes you were playing in obscure stadiums where there wasn't a huge crowd. It didn't feel super home because you're playing so many games. And the opponents are not weak by any means. You might be the U.S., you might be Mexico in your group, but it's still tough to get through. I feel like managing a tournament.
We need to give some comparisons to other tournaments. For me, a team like Haiti is like North Macedonia. They can beat you in World Cup qualifying at home like they did against Germany. They can come and steal some points from you in a tournament. Like, they've got some players that can win a game if you're not paying attention, if you're too casual, so you got to get to your top gear as soon as you possibly can and not give these smaller teams that belief that they can get a result. And if you give them a sniff or give them some chances 15, 20, 30 minutes in, we've been in enough of these games, Heath, you can feel they're like, hey, maybe we can beat these guys. Yeah. And when that gets clicked on for the whole team, that's trouble, because now you're fighting for every single ball in a way that maybe you weren't prior to, where they're a little bit nervous and a little bit vulnerable to start a game. So this goes for all the teams, not just the U.S. Mexico will go through it, Costa Rica, all the kind of favorites in each group will have to go and deal with this as they face some of the smaller nations.
Yeah, and I did want to mention that Qatar are in this edition of the Gold Cup. It's not unusual to have guest teams that aren't part of that confederation play in this, and obviously Qatar, the biggest struggle they're going to have hosting the next World Cup is competitive games, right? So this allows them to be in a competitive environment or a tournament type environment, because they're not going to have to qualify and go through those things that they need those in order to, I was reading that they're actually worried about the player development and team development because everything is mostly going to be a friendly. So this is helping to sort of prep them for that. Because otherwise, U.S. is going to go through World Cup qualifying. Everyone's going to go through World Cup qualifying. That's sort of going to battle harden you to qualify and do well in a World Cup. But if you don't have that, that can be a real struggle. And this is, I think, their only major, I guess it would be their only major tournament or tournament play before the World Cup.
I just want to raise my hand and say Qatar is going to get their asses kicked no matter it's the Gold Cup or in the World Cup. Thank you for coming. They just don't have enough players that are in the biggest leagues around the world to be able to compete. Once the World Cup really kicks off, these guys have no chance. But it is what it is. But your point is really valid for 2026, because Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. automatically qualify for that World Cup. And getting those meaningful games that are not friendlies are going to be tough. And this is where the Gold Cup will be very important for those three nations for that one.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with Group A. We've got Mexico, El Salvador, Curacao, and Trinidad. Is there, just starting with, say, El Salvador, Curacao, and Trinidad, is there anything that stands out to you from these teams? Obviously, Curacao is a nation that's trying to figure out how to work with dual nationals and improve their ability to qualify for a World Cup or be in contention. Again, if you look at 2026, if you're Curacao or any of these other smaller nations in CONCACAF, you know that there's more spots available. You know that there's an opportunity. And so a lot of that development starts now. Is there anything from an El Salvador standpoint, Curacao or Trinidad, that stands out to you?
Well, Trinidad didn't qualify for the World Cup Ocho, right? The last 8, they didn't qualify for that. So really, this is their only meaningful competition over the next few years. Not to say they would have qualified for the World Cup anyway, but they miss out on that opportunity to cut their teeth and to continue to develop their program. So the Soccer Warriors, as they're known, they're going to come with something. They're going to have a little bit of that bite that I think they're going to have, because there's somewhat of a desperation. They have a lot of good MLS players. A lot of them play for the Columbus Crew, in particular, Kevin Molino, Marcus Joseph, and Judah Garcia. But they're a mixed bag. Obviously, they knocked us out of the World Cup in 2018 qualifying. I don't really want to talk about it, because then I go off on a super rant and I get all emotional. And so you have to respect them, I'd say. But because they didn't qualify for the World Cup, you just don't know which version of them are going to show up. With Curacao, as you mentioned, these smaller nations have to figure out how do they hold on to their best players, because a lot of them are dual nationals. But there is one player in particular on Curacao that I'd be paying attention to. And I think they have a good chance of potentially getting through this group, because Trinidad is off the pace a little bit, and El Salvador, same. You just don't know how they're going to play on the day, and if their top players are going to perform. But the one player for Curacao, his name is Juninho Bacuna. He's 23. He plays currently for Huddersfield in the championship. And he did play for the Dutch side, Groningen. He was actually born in Groningen, but his parents were born in Curacao, so he has elected to play for them. He's 23, scored twice in 10 appearances. He's good. He's a very good player. When you couple him, who probably has a lot to prove, I think when you get in these international competitions, and we see it with the Euros too, we've seen some players kind of step up and perform, and you're like, oh, Patrick Schick, that guy's pretty good. Even though if you've been paying attention, you know that he's been banging in goals around Europe for quite a few seasons. So this is a good opportunity for some of these players to step up and cut their teeth, and obviously take pride in wearing their national team shirt. So I would keep an eye on him in particular. And then for El Salvador, the market value actually for Juninho, I did some research. He's around 5 or 6 million. So if he ends up having a good tournament, he could be a nice little sneaky buy for any clubs that are looking to improve their midfield. And then for El Salvador, there was one player that I had down. Let me find him really quick. It is... it's Darwin Acerin. He plays for Houston Dynamo. He's got 63 caps. He's a defensive midfielder, 31 years old, but he is really the heartbeat of the team. So if he's having a good game and his leadership is really shining through, El Salvador is always going to be tough to break down in a meaningful way. So this isn't going to be like straightforward for Mexico. They should roll through this group pretty easily, but for everybody else, you need your top players to perform. And if they don't, it's going to be a long night for you, or a long group stage.
Yeah, the other two that I'd add from El Salvador, Alex Roldan, Christian Roldan's brother.
Yes, yeah.
That's an interesting one. It's always interesting to see, two brothers playing for different countries. You have the Boatengs did that with Germany and Ghana. Pogba's played for Guinea and France, obviously. So it's always interesting and kind of cool to see. Just the world. It just, to me, it feels like the world gets a little bit closer when brothers are playing for different countries, and just shows you just the seamless world that we live in, and also just the multicultural identities that people have. If you look across our U.S. national team, there's so many multicultural players that identify with a number of nations, whether they were born there, have family from there, and whatever. It's pretty cool to see. And then Eric Zavaleta, who is Greg Vanny's nephew, will be playing for El Salvador as well. So I think that's another.
I didn't know that. Hey, congrats to him. He was with us.
Eric. Yeah.
Chivas USA.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
And so, yeah, he's another one. And so, for this Mexico roster, Jimmy, is there anybody that you're looking to kind of stand out? Not necessarily a player, but do you expect a pretty smooth ride? All things going well in the other groups. That both the U.S. and Mexico stay away from each other. That they reach the final.
Yeah, I think this is pretty one-sided for Mexico. They brought as close to an A team as possible. They're missing out on Guardado, who ended up having an injury, which I think might be for the best, just because it allows some younger players to maybe assume that leadership role and get some more experience. Rodolfo Pizarro is probably going to be out as well. And then because those two were out, you got Efrain Alvarez and Eric Sanchez who come in. And obviously they're two up-and-coming and exciting players for Mexico. So it should be pretty straightforward for them to get 3 straight wins, and really be in control of this tournament from the get-go. The one omission is Chicharito, because it cannot be for footballing reasons. It can only be personal, and I don't know what that is. And maybe as time passes, probably not anytime soon, but in a couple of years, maybe we'll get the truth as to why Chicharito isn't being called in, because he is playing well for the Galaxy. And the only reason I say that is because if you're going to call on Alan Pulido, who's done less for the Mexican national team and is currently carrying an injury, and he's getting called in and not scoring as many goals as Chicharito or being as influential for Sporting Kansas City, it just doesn't really make sense. Now, they're two somewhat different players. Pulido's a little bit bigger in terms of stature and physicality, so maybe there's some element of that Tata could lean into if he's trying to explain his way out of not bringing in Chicharito. But I thought that one was a little interesting, especially given the track record that Chicharito has for the Mexican national team. The guy always shows up for more often than not in the biggest games.
Yeah, I think that the issue that I think, Tata Martino is a little militant in the way that he does things, right? It's his sort of way or there's no way. And I think his whole thing, and I think he's made comments about it before, which is like, either you're all in or you're all out. Like, we don't want you for a Gold Cup and then you decide, I want to focus on my club team. Like, everyone sacrifices. And I think, honestly, the U.S. went through this at a certain point, too, of guys not wanting to come in around in that 2018 cycle of guys being like, I'm going to focus on the club. And then, the travel and all these things was rough. And I remember that being a prevalent issue. And I think that can be detrimental, knowing that, look, when I was playing in Europe, I sometimes it was a long flight, right. There's a lot of time zones and a lot of jet lag, and you're away from your family, and all those things can be really hard, and you can be homesick for a number of reasons. And I know Chicharito's been through a lot coming off of last season where he only scored a couple of goals. I know he's going through some personal situations with his family. And now, back in form. I hope that there was some sort of conversation that's been had about, hey, where do you stand, Chicharito? Like, are you ready to come back in? Are you ready to be part of this?
I will say that, yes, there's different elements and different coaches that have different styles, and some of them like it when you test them. Some of them like it when you not necessarily show attitude, but that you back yourself, that you have that confidence to go in and say, you know what, I do belong here. I do have enough talent to play a big part in what happens with this team. So Mexico just played Nigeria. Let's keep it on Mexico for a sec. And this tune-up game here, they won 4-0. And I saw the highlights, and they looked very good. They scored in the second minute and were cruising pretty much from the get-go. Nigeria, definitely not with their A team by any stretch of the imagination. And it showed. They had no shots on goal, and Mexico had 11. I just wanted to see, though, what their front three is. And they got Funes Mori up top, Irving Lozano.
Oh, Funes Mori, by the way, another guy who has split national team. His brother plays Argentina. He could
have played for us too. Tecatito, I think he could play for Argentina. He could have played for potentially 3 countries. So Tecatito, Funes Mori, and Irving Lozano were their front three. And Funes Mori has been playing pretty well over the last, let's say, 18 months, 2 years in particular, and really picked up his game and scoring a lot of goals in Liga MX. And then they have Herrera, they had Alvarez and Gutierrez right behind it. They're solid. And if Tata Martino, clearly based on the roster that he called in, means business. I mean, they are bringing the squad, and I think they're going to win this tournament. Whereas when we get into the U.S., obviously it's not going to look the same.
But Jimmy, this goes back to the argument of having a strong domestic league. I think Major League Soccer is strong, but there's always that desire to go somewhere else, to go higher, right? Whereas a lot of Mexican players stay in Mexico or stay in the region, and therefore their availability for Olympic qualifying and Gold Cup and these types of things becomes a little bit more reasonable in terms of how you, I guess what I'm saying is Liga MX clubs, just like Major League Soccer, work well with the federation to make sure players are available for these types of tournaments where technically they may not need to be because it's not sanctioned in a way. And especially if they'd played in Nations League, they could be potentially eliminated. But the clubs, the league and the national teams or the federation tend to work well together. So now you see this roster that's coming out saying like, no, we own the Gold Cup. We are coming after the Gold Cup. And that is it's a very different experience of a team than this U.S. squad, which has a lot of talent. But again, this is the first Gold Cup or even official competition for a lot of these guys on the U.S. team.
I look forward to diving into the U.S. a little bit, but I just want to go back to Rogelio Funes Mori because I said the last couple of seasons, I mean, he's actually been killing it for a while, but he just got his first cap for the Mexican national team this year in 2021. Since he joined Monterrey in 2015, he scored 20 goals, 15 goals, 17 goals, 16 goals, 15 and 15. I mean, the guy has been super consistent. So it's actually quite surprising that it's taken him so long to get into the team. And maybe it's because he was, to your point about Tata Martino, maybe they just wanted him to, you have to commit to Mexico. You can't be holding out hope for Argentina, or if you wanted to make a switch to the US, because he was born in Argentina, but played for the FC Dallas Academy when he was a kid. So it's, he could have maybe had that option too, if he wanted to see that out. So there's a big opportunity for him in particular, right? To really put a stamp on things, especially 18 months outside of from a World Cup.
Yeah. I look at this Mexico squad and automatically, and it doesn't take, super research to realize that this team is by far the best in terms of their experience, the quality of the players, where they play at, the level that they play at, the experience they have in the national team at the club level within this competition.
What's interesting, and this will also obviously be a theme for the U.S., is that when I look at Mexico's roster, they don't have too many of their younger players that we saw in the Nations League, let's say, for instance. And they have the Olympics. They have the U23 team, for the most part, is getting prepared for the Olympics. So they don't call those players in. And it makes me wonder what Greg Berhalter would have done had we qualified for the Olympics, because then you really would have had to balance the team in a way. Because we have a lot of our, U23 guys that were in and around that pool that would have been gone for that. So that really interesting.
How would you stack the importance of the summer of soccer for CONCACAF, right? You had Nations League, and I know there was some rules around Nations League and then playing in other competitions. And then you have Gold Cup, and then you have the Olympics. So should the U.S. have been in all of them, and you are U.S. soccer, right? You got your U.S. soccer visor on, which is which is what every official from U.S. soccer wears. And how do you rank those or prioritize those? Because, we saw, you remember back in 2007, played a Gold Cup, won the Gold Cup, and then went down to Copa America with a completely different squad against with
relatively no preparation.
No preparation. It was literally within 3 days you're playing a game because it came off the back of that Gold Cup. Complete change of a roster for the most part, except for 2 or 3 guys. And now you're playing against the A teams from South America who are prioritizing.
I'm gonna tap dance into this just a little bit, because we got to stay focused here, because me and Heath love to tell stories. But the fact that in our group in 2007, we went down to Venezuela, we had to play Argentina first. We couldn't play Paraguay first, or even Colombia first. We had to play goddamn Argentina first, with Riquelme and Crespo and Zanetti and Messi and
all of them.
Cambiaso, like Crest. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It was a stupid team, dude. It was a stupid team. Tevez came off the bench. I remember him coming off the bench, and I was dead tired in the 75th minute. Like, this is not fair. And he's taking me on 1v1.
Every time, by the way, I come off the bench, I think about the big stars that also have to come off the bench, and I go, see, it's not that bad. Everyone goes through it. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. It would be tough, I think. I think the Nations League was a priority. I think it was almost a mandated priority, as you said, from CONCACAF. Like, we need the Nations League to start being a big deal. This is a tournament that we need to give more weight to. You can't bring a second squad to this. The Gold Cup was a good opportunity, and we'll get into it about the U.S. to try some of our younger players. I think you and I had used that Gold Cup experience in a meaningful way. And then with regard to the Olympics, well, we haven't qualified for it for the last 3, so it feels like super hypothetical, but I think you just would have had guys have to play back-to-back tournaments, even though they would have crossed over. Actually, you wouldn't have been able to do it because the Olympics starts before the Gold Cup would end. So that would have been a really difficult challenge, I think, for Greg Berhalter to balance. And maybe some of those European guys would have had to stick around, but now they didn't have to. So it all kind of worked out. Yeah. And I think, again, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important for the people listening to understand the complexities of how these things interact with each other. Right. And it's not as easy to just say, you should qualify for all these things and win all these things, and we should be the best, because look at our A team, like they can only be in so many places. They're like superheroes, you can't have somebody solving crime over here and then be somewhere else, at least that I know of in terms of the superhero power. So I think it's important for people to understand the complexities of how you manage a summer and how you have to sort of hedge your bets on a few things. And I think they hedged their bets on Nations League and won that. Now we have a crop of players. Let's move on to Group B from the U.S. team that I think have a ton of potential. And I think a springboard. And again, for people that don't know, a Gold Cup or a tournament like this is a really important stepping stone for players, because you get a run of games if you're doing well. If you are a starter in this tournament, you will get potentially 6 games, right? And that could mean a lot in terms of where you started and where you end in terms of your comfort, in terms of proving yourself. A couple of these guys from this group will certainly make the World Cup roster. And I don't mean like Sebastian Lletget and players like that are more established. Other players can reestablish themselves and get a run of games that go, man, how have I left this guy out? Yeah, I wasn't really rating him that much in terms of my first 11 or first 18 for my team because of how he's playing at his club. But he really stepped up in this tournament, and now he's indispensable. Would you agree with that?
Yes, because I lived it. So going into the 2005 Gold Cup, I was uncapped. I don't even know if I'd gotten on a bench at that point. I had gone down to a couple World Cup qualifiers, and Bruce had brought me in to kind of experience what it looks like. And I remember going down to Trinidad, and Eddie Pope was preparing to play this World Cup qualifier, and he's drinking pickle juice. And I was like, what pickle juice? But it retains the sodium a little bit, and it helps you hydrate and stay hydrated for longer, right? These little things, but and you're in these really, and as you know, right, you go down to these countries and they're not very accommodating to the visiting team, and you're in these really tight things, and you have a whole bunch of people that are almost shoulder to shoulder, and it was an incredible experience for me. We ended up winning 2-1. I think Eddie Johnson scored a brace, but it was an incredible experience, and I gained from that. And then as I continued to prove and play well for my club, as well as anytime I got called in to go to these little mini camps for the qualifiers, I maybe sat on the bench but never played. So I get named to the Gold Cup roster uncapped. Okay. And at this point, I'm a late bloomer, as everybody knows, when I'm going to roll the clip, if you guys are familiar with that. And I was 28. So I get my first cap. We play against Cuba. And I start. I didn't think I would start the first game. I thought they'd kind of roll with the A guys. And we had a good solid squad, but I started and we're down 1-0. And to my point earlier about going down to Haiti when I was captain, I felt the same way. My first ever start, we're losing to Cuba. What the hell is happening right now? It was Clint Dempsey's first ever cap too. So we were in Seattle. We come back and win. Clint ended up scoring. And right before half, which helped, right? You take that pressure off before halftime. Then we kind of just our experience and talent ultimately saw us through. And we're just a little bit fitter. And I think that made the difference. So I was happy to do that. But I ended up 2 days later, we played against Canada. And I was on the bench and Eddie Pope got hurt. So I played the last 45 minutes. And it was really important for me. And I bring this up because you're right. We are going to see some players that are going to fill a role for Greg Berhalter's team in the World Cup. And I knew that I wasn't going to start on this team. If I went to a World Cup, I wasn't going to be a out and out starter. I knew that I was going to have to be a role player, which meant I needed to come in and prove a lot of things on the field and off. Do I have a good attitude when I don't play? Am I supportive of the teammates that are around me? Am I still being a benefit? How's my communication? Can you put me in any situation on the field? Like say we got a lead with 10 minutes left to go. Can you trust me? Hey, somebody gets hurt at halftime. Can you come in with last 45 minutes and hold off Canada, even though you just played 90 plus minutes 2 days before, and still be a guy we can trust? And I was the only player in that tournament that played all 6 games, and we ended up winning it. So that was very important, not only because of that opportunity that I took advantage of, but also because it gave me, like if they're trying to have me compete against somebody else, maybe we're on the bubble. They have this thing, like we know what Jimmy looks like over 30 days of a tournament. And that's what the World Cup is. It's really hard to evaluate players when you have this FIFA window in the middle of a season, club season, and you have 7 days. I remember going out there, and you've done it too, where we know we're on the bubble. So if you're one of those bubble guys and you're trying to win over the coach, you are balls to the wall at training. You want to prove that you're better than the European-based guys. You want to just figure that out. And then everybody, I get this a lot. The coach is like, hey man, can you turn it down like 3 levels because you're out of goddamn control. But I was just so eager to prove that I deserved to be there and I could hang with those guys. But so that's a really hard time in place to win the coaching staff over in those little short windows during the season. But over the summer, over the 45 days, if you include the 2 weeks prior to the camp, it's a great opportunity. So that's a really long way of me saying that I'm living proof that there's going to be some players that are going to take advantage of this. It's just a matter of which ones are going to do it. So I'm very excited to see there are no wrong names. People are trying to nitpick this roster. This is an amazing roster because so many of these guys are going to have a great opportunity to win over Greg Berhalter in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, that's well said. It's just a hugely and again, even outside of that, the training windows and things like that, you just have more of them, right? And you just have more face time with the squad. But let's talk about Canada in Group B. So Group B, Canada, obviously so many quality players from Kyle Aaron to Jonathan David to obviously Alphonso Davies. And they've now reached the octagonal in World Cup qualifying for the first time in a long time. And they are going through their own generational growth right now where they have a lot of players playing in big clubs. Before you really just had your Dwayne De Rosario and Atiba Hutchinson and a couple others. Now you've got a deeper squad and a little bit more of a vision and a plan that I think aligns with, one, the Canadian Premier League, two, Major League Soccer, the growth of all these things. And then obviously you have your dual nationals as well that I think are contributing. But is there anybody from the Canadian team that you're excited to watch?
Of course, Alphonso Davies stands out. I just want to say overall, though, so people have some context, this is the first time that Canada has advanced to this final round of World Cup qualifying since 1997. So that's a real big step for the program and should give them a lot of belief. Also, they've only qualified for one World Cup, and it was back in 86. They won the Gold Cup in 2000, so they had a little bit of a generation back in the day, but that has changed. Now it seems, to Heath's point, and as evidence bears out, they have some really talented players. Alphonso Davies, he's always been known as a top player, but I think Bayern Munich made some great business. I don't know how much was, like 10, 15 million from Vancouver, and now he's worth 70, 80 million, considered one of the best left backs in the world, one of the best young players in the world. So that's pretty good. They also have Kyle Aaron. He was the top scorer at Besiktas this year as it won its domestic league. So that's a big deal. He'll be coming in with a lot of confidence. Junior Hoylett has been a dependable player in the English Championship, most recently with Cardiff. Unfortunately, Jonathan David, who scored 13 goals for Lille as they won the Liga title this season, he has a groin injury, and apparently he's going to rest instead of playing in the Gold Cup. That's a big loss for them because
that's a huge loss.
He led he was a Golden Boot winner into the 2019 Gold Cup. So it's really interesting to see how they're going to balance the loss of Jonathan David in particular. But they did pick up Ayo Akinola, who did represent the U.S. in a friendly, but decided to play for Canada instead. And he could have helped us, but I can understand why he decided to go to Canada. There's probably a little bit more opportunity there for him to get more games and more minutes. I'm bummed though, because anytime we lose a good dual national that would have provided either depth or could start for us, it's a bit of a blow. But we move, as they say. Anyway, I think Canada will get out of this group. I think they'll be second behind us, and I think that this is a good opportunity for them to continue to grow this group and their base, right, and get this experience. Even though I was giving my own personal experience from an individual standpoint, collectively, this team needs to know how to cope with adversity, how to fight in big games, how to hold on to leads as they continue to get better, which is part of our evolution as a country as well. Hey, how do we start playing better than teams that we should be beating? We had a tough time, and I think this was part of our identity change. And I think we went through a little bit of that transition, Heath, when we were playing. We would always play to the level of our competition, but now we're getting much better at, hey, we're so much better than these guys. Let's not give them a chance to stomp on their throats in the beginning. And that's nice to see. And I'm happy that transition is happening. But Canada's kind of mired in that a little bit, where sometimes they play to the level of their competition. They're still not really taking the game by the scruff of the neck and saying, we're in charge of this whole thing, and there's no way we're going to give you any chance. So we'll see which version of that is. But their manager, John Hertzman, has been doing a good job of bringing these players along, and their talent continues to grow. So this is a big opportunity for them to get some good experience, and then obviously hopefully make a deep run, and we'll see how they perform in the bigger games.
Yeah, and then you've got your Jonathan Osorio, Mark Anthony Kaye, guys like that are just solid contributors with good experience. That I think it's weird when you look at all those players and then you match them up against the U.S. squad at this point. It's a pretty tight game at the moment at just these rosters. And it always made me wonder how Canada, when I played against Canada only once, but the time that I did, it's a tight game. It's not like Canada's never been way behind the U.S. or Mexico or anybody in CONCACAF, and the fact that they haven't made the final qualifying round since the 90s is alarming to me. And it just seemed like there was a few pieces missing, and they seem to have those pieces now with more experienced players playing at high levels, and then obviously starting to have these breakout stars like a Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies. My whole thing is, where does Alphonso Davies play in the Canada squad? What position does he play that you best utilize him, right? He's considered one of the best fullbacks in the world now.
But not necessarily for his defensive prowess. I mean, he'll do the work, but it's not because that's what he's known for. He's known for the transitioning and getting forward and creating numerical advantages out wide. So I'd put him in a wingback position, frankly.
But even at a wingback, like this is a guy that has like when you see him in the final third, right, for Bayern Munich in the Champions League, he is beating players regularly. So is wingback the best position that you use him for your national team, or can he have a larger role? I'm not saying he's a 10 or even a central midfielder, but even when they played Haiti to qualify for the final round, I believe it was against Haiti, he was still coming from those deep positions. And I'm like, this feels like an underutilization of a player who's so good on the ball and so good in the attacking sense. That you've got him, that he's got to come from a deep position every time. I just feel like perhaps is that underutilized or is it a system thing?
It's tough because you mentioned the players you mentioned, Osorio and Mark-Anthony Kaye kind of occupy that central area. And then you have Kyle Larin and it would be Jonathan David, so they could maybe just put Kyle Larin as the out and out 9 and maybe push up Davies to be more of a winger and just play. Yeah. I mean, it looked like they played a back 3 in both games against Haiti, but I think that just puts
I guess that's a good sign. That's a good sign. If you're talking about Jonathan David and Kyle Larin as your 2 strikers, that's a pretty good sign that your player who's considered probably in the world 11 is still a wingback or fullback, unless you switch to a 4-3-3 and spread them out a little bit. That's a great shout. But
yeah, I mean they've got options. Yeah, they got options, and their depth is growing, and I think their confidence is growing. I mean they've made some moves to make that happen, but now you have all this, you have a little bit of momentum. What does that mean? And I think that's the big step for individuals, and also when they're going through it in their career, and then also collectively as a team. So this is going to be a big moment for Canada to continue to prove why they're an emerging nation and why they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, not only in the future, but also in 2026 when they get to host.
Yeah. All right, Jimmy, I'm gonna go a little bit outside of the scope of what we were trying to do here from a rhythm standpoint. We're gonna jump to Group C and D, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about this USA squad.
Got it.
So let's jump down to Group C: Costa Rica, Jamaica, Suriname, and Guadeloupe, who also I think qualified on just a couple days ago to get into the group stages of the Gold Cup. In this group, who do you see as your favorites? Have you do you have any other experiences having played against some of the smaller Caribbean nations and the difficulties of that? Is there anybody like a Costa Rica or Jamaica that stands out to you? Jamaica is my sleeper team that I think could go run. Andre Blake always balls out in the Gold Cup. He owns the Gold Cup. True. And so I think that they could be a dangerous team as well.
We can whip through these ones pretty quick. I think they're all, at least the top teams in each of these groups, are kind of in similar spots, which for me, they're all kind of going through a phase of, hey, we have a lot of older players and our younger players haven't really done enough to kick them out just yet. I know the U.S. kind of went through that a few years ago as well, but now obviously we have a straight youth movement going, and I'm all for it. Costa Rica has actually never won a Gold Cup, though they did win the previous rendition of this called the CONCACAF Championship in 1963, 69, and 89. So how's that for fun facts? Their head coach, they just fired their guy right before the Gold Cup. And now Luis Fernando Suarez comes in. Now, Suarez led Ecuador to the World Cup in 2006 and Honduras to Brazil in 2014. So he's got some experience, and I think that's a pretty good hire. But the point is, he doesn't know these players yet. The Ticos, Costa Rica will not have Keylor Navas. They will not have probably one of their top defenders in Christian Gamboa, who plays for Bochum in Germany. They won't have one of their top younger players, Manfred Ugalde, who plays at Twente in the Netherlands, 18-year-old. So this will be interesting for a lot of different reasons. They're missing a few of their top players, one of their top younger players. They've got a brand new coach. They still have enough quality and experience. And I thought they were a little unlucky in the Nations League. They lost both games in penalties, even to Mexico. So they've got something to them. The Ticos have always had something to them. I know you've played against them, and they're going to be tough. And I expect them to win the group, actually over Jamaica. And the reason I say over Jamaica is because Jamaica, who've been hustling to try to get as many players that have dual citizenship as possible, like Mikel Antonio from West Ham, he's not going to be in, Mikel Antonio, which is unfortunate because I just thought, man, if they bring in all the guys that could play for Jamaica, they would be my sleeper team. So he's out. Also not going Swansea City's Jamal Lowe is going to be out. Watford's Andre Gray is probably not going to be there either. So that hurts them. But to your point, their captain, Andre Blake, is a stud in goal. They still got defender Liam Moore, who plays for Reading, Blair Turgott. They made their international debuts, but these guys are good players. You got Leon Bailey, plays for Bayer Leverkusen, excellent player. He's going to be the key man, I think, and another super talent. So
Leon Bailey, by the way, had 15 goals, 10 assists across all competitions. So he's
good.
Obviously,
he's good.
And
they got players
he can take over games too when he's in that form. So
they got Michael Hector, who I like, plays at Fulham. In Elvis Powell. There's some players that have been in MLS for a long time, and they're going to be solid. The thing that I've always learned about Jamaica is you just kind of have to, if you can just be a little organized. There are times, and this actually goes for Costa Rica as well, now that I think about it, especially with a new coach. When they're getting tactics or trying to get everybody together, I always just felt if you stay organized, at some point, they're going to get frustrated with each other. And I guess this goes actually for all the smaller nations. But I've seen it with Costa Rica. I've seen it with Honduras as well, and Jamaica. There is a point where when things aren't unlocking the way that they want, it's almost like they get there a little bit quicker in terms of being frustrated because they know they should be doing better. And if you can kind of get them to that point, and this goes for, if the U.S. can be patient, you don't always have to go and win the game in the first 5 minutes. And I don't know why I'm thinking from a U.S. perspective, but probably because I played for them. But I would say that these are the instances when a team maybe doesn't have all their top players, when they don't have all these things, you got a new coach. If you can just kind of wait them out, at some point gaps are going to be open and those gaps can be exploited. And that's when you have to go and kind of strike and make it happen. So I just wonder. But in terms of talent, Jamaica has to be one of the most talented teams. It's just a matter of whether they can get everybody on the same page. And we saw it with the Euros. Can the manager pick the best 11 that actually fit the team? We've seen some teams, even Spain, heading into the semifinals of the Euros. Did they play their best 11? Do they even know what their best 11 is? And so I could see it kind of happening with a couple teams in this group, but most notably Costa Rica and Jamaica.
Yeah, that's a great shout. It's also, one of the things I wanted to point out before we jump to Group D is, interestingly, in the Gold Cup, and I remember this specifically, you go into your third game in the group stage, wondering where the other group is going to finish out, right?
True.
So if you have somebody that's behind, if you're Honduras or Panama and you're looking to play, Jamaica as your matchup because you've been watching them, you're like, well, I need to finish first in this last game. I need to win this last game. Or do we want to Jamaica's going to finish top of the group. We'd rather take them out in the next game. It's not that you play any difference, but you start to get into this tournament play, which is just very different in terms of how you establish yourself. Every team plays to win the group, but you start to look at what the matchups are, in a disaster scenario where the U.S. finishes second or Mexico finishes second in their group. Like that is going to be really rough. For whoever finishes top their group, right? It's not who you want to be.
Yeah, great point.
Facing off against, and not that you can control any of that, but one thing I wanted to mention. Anyways, moving on to Group D, Jimmy, Grenada, Honduras, Panama, Qatar, or Qatar if you work for the U.S. government.
Yeah, for me, Grenada is an interesting one. They have a lot of talent. Like a lot of smaller nations, and sometimes when they have a lot of talent, a lot of the dual, other countries come calling, "Hey, can you play for us?" But there is one player, Shandon Baptiste, that super valuable. I think one of the most valuable players on, let's say, Transfer Market or whatever that website is. At 23 years of age, he got hurt, but he plays for Brentford, and obviously they just got promoted to the Premiership. He hurt his knee early on in the season, so he didn't play much. Was out for most of it. Prior to that, the season before, where they got knocked out in the promotion playoffs, he played 13 or 14 games. So he's really right on the cusp of, once he gets healthy, of hopefully breaking into that team and getting some really valuable Premier League experience. So I'm looking at him from Grenada. Honduras, they're so difficult. We saw them play in the Nations League. They're never an easy game. They maybe should have stole a result against us in the semifinals. They were very close to doing that. And the player obviously that stands out, and I think who I'm going to say, is Albert Elise. He's been around. He's 25 only, but I feel like he's been around for a long time. He has 10 goals in 42 appearances with Honduras. He's played for Olimpia, Monterrey, Houston Dynamo, and he currently plays for Boa Vista in Portugal. And it's just good experience. And that guy, I thought, can be a game changer all by himself. So we'll see if he ends up hitting the back of the net. We know he's the type of player that will get himself in good spots, but will he have that final moment of composure to relax and hit the back of the net? I mean, we see it with top players all over the world. Timo Werner really stands out. Alvaro Morata stands out, where these guys are so good at getting themselves in good spots, but then it's just that little bit of class in that exact moment. He has it sometimes. There's some games I'm like, this guy's unplayable. I watch Elise play and they can't stop him because he can check back in and get it. And if you don't go with him, he's going to turn and run at you. And you're like, oh, well, shit, I'm in trouble here. Or if you go too tight, they play a ball over the top and he's going to roll you and he's going to be in. And you're like, oh, I mean, I remember seeing it with Eddie Johnson when he was at his peak. Like the guy was unplayable and at least has that world-class talent, but it's just, he's got to be able to finish it. He does all those other little things right. And you're like, oh, he's so close. So if he can do that and find it in this tournament, then I think Honduras is going to be fine. They should get through their group anyway. But if they want to take those big steps and actually get farther into the knockout rounds and potentially beat a Mexico or a US or a Costa Rica or whoever, a lot of it's going to ride on his shoulders in particular.
Yeah. And also another thing about these group plays is now you've got a team with Grenada, which, Honduras and Panama will be familiar with, but not super familiar. You've got these rotating squads of who's in, who's out because of just the complexities of this summer and where who's at their clubs, who's injured, who's fit, all the other things that go into it. And then you've got Qatar, who's another team that you're going to be able to look at, but a completely different style of play than what you typically see in CONCACAF, right? With some of the more some of the Latino countries and Hispanic countries in terms of their style of play and the rhythm at which they play on. So there's a lot of unknowns in there. I know you say Qatar is going to get battered, but it'll be interesting to see how they approach this tournament in terms of quality, how they stack up or match up against this group. I will say though, one thing that you always get from, and we saw it with Costa Rica, we saw it with Honduras, is they are willing to scrap and they are not going to give anybody anything. And there might be a few moments in a game, like you talked about, Jimmy, where you just stay disciplined and you're going to get your one or two moments and you got to be able to finish them. But they definitely take a certain level of pride in these tournaments and anything regional related to try to see themselves deep into a tournament. So it'll be interesting to see who gets out of this group as well, and then who they end up having to face.
Yeah. For me, Group D is pretty wide open.
Yeah,
it's wide open. I think Grenada could get a couple results and shock some people. Honduras, I think, are the favorites. I think they'll go through. Panama, for me, they qualified for the last World Cup. Obviously, very exciting. First time they've ever done that. And they're still relying on some very, very older players. and that's not a good sign of what the future looks like for your team. And those guys have a lot of mileage on their bodies. And I think that a Grenada, I don't see Qatar potentially doing it, but Panama, and that's the thing, to your point, if Panama gets through maybe third place and all of a sudden the US or Mexico have to play Panama in the next round, you're like, oh my God, why are we playing these guys in the quarterfinals, or whatever it is. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But I don't see Panama doing much in this tournament, but they could be tough, especially when they know they're they've actually played better when they're the underdogs. Yeah. When they have to go out and be the favorites and take it to the game, I don't feel like they're as comfortable in that situation. But yeah, anyway, this is going to be a great tournament, and I hope everybody tunes in to watch. Are we talking about the U.S. now, or what's the story? Yeah, I'm all dressed up.
Listen, first of all, I just want to thank everybody who stayed with us through this long as we buried the lead of getting to the U.S. team, because I know I'm sure a lot of people are interested in this U.S. team. So, Jimmy, let's talk about this U.S. roster. So many new faces and exciting faces. Obviously, you have your Christian Roldan, who's not necessarily new. Sebastian Lletget, Paul Arriola's back in the team, but you also have some exciting ones. Jesse Zardes, by the way, is back, and again, a known face. But in terms of a lot of these new players from your George Bello to Shaq Moore, I mean, they're not brand new, but they are sort of still establishing themselves within the national team. Gianluca Busio will likely get his first caps. He's being linked with a number of transfers abroad at the moment and is really having a breakout year as he continues to build his career. What stands out to you, or what do you expect from the squad? Where do you think we're weak? Where do you think we're strong? And yeah, do you think we should be able to cruise?
Yeah, I don't know about cruise. I think it's going to be very similar to what I said about Costa Rica and Jamaica. We have a new group of players that are playing together ultimately for the first time in a meaningful way. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some frustration when things aren't working exactly right. And then it's going to be about managing that. And that's where the experience comes in. So that's where, having a player like Walker Zimmerman, who's been around for a while, will help. Sebastian Lletget, having some leadership in the spine of the team that can help kind of calm the nerves and get it going for this young group. And obviously a group that has a lot to prove, who definitely know that they could parlay a great tournament into potentially be considered for the World Cup team, which is something, again, that I lived through and I already shared that experience. For me, though, there are a couple areas of the field that can be solidified or won outright. And I'm looking at Daryl Dike as our number 9. If he does not get sold by Orlando, obviously he did very well for Barnsley when he went over to the championship. He's come back to Orlando right now because Barnsley didn't want to pay the fee or whatever, but maybe that can be worked out. But DK, definitely a hot name on the transfer market for a good price. He's already scored 2 goals in 4 games for Orlando since coming back. He looks excited. He looks motivated. No big surprise. He's a superhuman being. And I want to see how he does in this particular, where a lot of it is going to fall on his shoulders. My only issue with this team, I think, overall is we don't really have any out-and-out wingers per se. Areola may be the only one that's like an out-and-out winger. Everybody else, you're kind of hoping that they can play. I want to see Matthew Hoppe. I think that's a good one that I'd like to see. I know Jonathan Lewis was a big surprise, but I think that Greg knows him and wants to give him that last chance to see how he performs. Everywhere else, though, I think Reggie Cannon can solidify his position and maybe be the right back for us, which could potentially push Serginho Dest on the left side moving forward in World Cup qualifying. I wish I would have seen Anthony Robinson, honestly, from Fulham come in and really, he still hasn't owned that left back position. So I think there's some opportunity there from Sam Bynes in particular to take that. Miles Robinson seeing him in. So another center back, Walker Zimmerman getting that opportunity. Everything else, Busio, I think there's like these little Christian Roldan, there's Eric Williamson. There are guys that could maybe come in as that 21, 22, spot on the World Cup team that could help us and make sure that they provide depth in case of an emergency or whatever it is. And then the goalkeeper position, I think this is a good opportunity for Matt Turner to really put a stamp on things to say, hey, I think I can compete for the number 1 job. So there are a lot of great narratives around this, but ultimately I know there's some nitpicking and people bitching about certain players in and certain players out. I think this is awesome. As someone who's lived it, I've got nothing but positives to say about this roster. And I wish all the players the best of luck because this is such a huge opportunity.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to follow up on was, again, when you go back to what we talked about earlier on just the run of games. And I think, again, the players that stand out to me, and this isn't just a lazy take, are the ones that you said. Walker Zimmerman, I think the center back position is still open for contention. And if you're Walker, you look at that Nations League and that fires you up to compete, right? You come in right after you got called in. I think you played the second half in Utah against Costa Rica. And you come in with that fire of saying, I think I'm better than Mark McKenzie, or I think I'm better than, and now you're going to get a window probably to be able to prove that. Right. And then if you look at Miles Robinson, same sort of thing. You now have an opportunity to say, well, you know what? I want this spot. And I know Greg Berhalter had made some comments about, bringing him in to play him. That's a great sign. And you now have this growth curve. And we've seen this. Like, if you go back to, not to talk too much about our era, whether it was a Matt Beasler or somebody like that, they come in a little bit later, yourself included. And then you come onto the scene and you're like, I'm going to grab this and I'm not going to let it go. And it takes a moment, or it takes a tournament like this for you to build that confidence, to build that belief, and then be like, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one that this coach looks at now and goes, I can't, there's nothing I can do to leave this guy off this team or off this roster. And then Daryl Dike, same thing. I agree with you. That string of games, this tournament, as far as they can go, I think will be dependent on the success he has as well. I think he can lead this team. You saw from his very first cap, he's so hungry to score goals. He was so good in the championship in that style of play. It's a very specific style of play. But, again, you put the ball in the box enough times, he's going to get on the end of it. He's going to carry bodies. He's going to hold up play. He's going to do all those little things that you need to scrap, and reminds me very much of the era of a Brian Ching in the past, even a Brian McBride, a Connor Casey, these types of guys that are big bodies, physical, can hold the ball, can draw fouls, can do all the things that you need to do with regard to game management in big games when you head away to CONCACAF and things like that. But also in games like this, being able to have to finish and clinically know that, hey, there might be long periods because this group has never played together, where we're out of rhythm, the passes aren't connecting. So can you get that one chance, finish it, and be like, okay, now we can settle down and breathe. And that's what I think is going to come down to. Maybe it's a Matthew Hoppe, maybe it's an Areola, but I think Daryl Dike is the one that I'm looking at in terms of, and Jussie Zardes, obviously. I'm not sure if they'll play with 2 up there, if they'll play with 1. But, I want to see Daryl Dike get a run of games. So at least we can say, okay, he's there or he's not quite there yet. And maybe the next cycle is where he really comes into form.
Yeah, there's 2 things I want to say before I finish with, and I'll just start with the ending first, just to save you guys all the excitement and drama. It better be U.S. versus Mexico in the final August 1st in Las Vegas, because I want to go to Las Vegas and I need a reason to do so. And you guys better make it happen. No pressure. Now, with regard to the little insights, what is very difficult, and I think we're going to see who can manage it the best, is all these players, as I mentioned, and as you've mentioned, this is a big opportunity. They know it. How do you go out there and not try too hard? There's a really delicate balance that you think you have to find as a player to, hey, I want to play simple, but I also want to prove why I should be on this team, because you know that if you want to kind of level up and get Greg's attention, not only do you have to do the simple things perfect every time, but you also have to add something. What are you bringing to the table that's just a little bit different, or can add a little spice to what he already has at his disposal? He already knows this is probably his first 14, 15, 16 guys, but those are still areas to I think to win him over for those last 5 or 6 spots. So how do you do that? And if you try too hard, and we've seen it at national team camps when nobody's looking. We're not even talking about games. We're talking about these January camps where you're there for a month and you're grinding. How do you separate yourself there? And that's going to be really important. So one of the things that I did was that I knew that if I came to the national team, and I'm a late bloomer, I didn't get my first cap till I was 28, right? So I had to come in and already have a certain level of confidence that I knew what I was doing. I'm not just some young punk that doesn't really know what's going on. I don't have that life experience yet. I have that life experience. I know what I have in front of me, and I didn't want to lose it. So what I had to do and what I had to tell myself was I need to yell good information to the Claudio Reynas and Pablo Mastrianis and Chris Armises and all these guys, Steve Cherundolo, all these decorated players, Eddie Pope right next to me. I used to watch Eddie Pope growing up, and now I'm playing next to him, and I knew exactly how he was going to move in every situation because I studied his game. And that really helped me, actually, when I played next to him. But I had to get outside of myself because I was so nervous to talk to these guys, let alone yell at them and give them good information. But I knew that if I was going to make this team, I had to be a communicator, especially as a center back. I had to put guys in good spots to make plays. The problem is they don't trust you right away because they've never played with you before. Yeah, they've seen you, whatever it might be, but how do you earn that trust quickly? So what I did was I'd pull Pablo or Claudio or whoever off to the side, John O'Brien, right? These guys with so much experience, and say, listen, I'm not giving you information just to give you information. I'm not a person who just talks to talk and just so I can get attention for that. I'm trying to make the game easier for you. And when I'm telling you to move left, it's probably to block a passing lane and or whatever it may be. And if I'm giving you that information, it's because I want you to do less running. And if we're all doing less running, we're having a bunch of fun out here. Mm-hmm. And when I break it down to them that simply and tell them exactly where I'm coming from with my information, then they start to trust me more, especially, let's say, when I put them in a good spot and they cut out a pass and now we're transitioning the other way. And then that trust happens quick. But you have to create those relationships and you have to create that rapport and you have to be a leader in that way. And that was really hard for me to do, Heath, and everybody listening, to get outside of myself and to really say, this is how I think. I almost had to envision what I thought a national team center back would play. What does that person do? Like if you're captain of the national team, how do they act? How do they carry themselves? How do they treat other people? How do they do all this other stuff? And that's what these guys have to embody, because if you want to represent our country at a World Cup, you have to figure out what that looks like, what you envision a player of that stature to be, and then almost work backwards to, okay, I'm going to act like this, and then I'm going to try to fake it till I make it, and hopefully I get there. Fortunately, it worked out for me, but a lot of these guys are going to have to step outside of their comfort zones to be proper leaders of a national team. It's one thing for your club. It's something different completely for your national team. And that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for some of these guys as they try to differentiate themselves from the rest. Because as you say with Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman in particular, those two guys are battling essentially for the same spot.
I like that. Well said, Jimmy. And I'm going to take that as your closing thoughts for today. But everyone, just so you know, Jimmy and I will be with you guys throughout the Gold Cup. Popping
Dream comes true, everybody. Yeah. Dream comes true.
You can't get rid of us. We have nothing but words to say all day long. But we'll save some as the Gold Cup advances. And if you don't already, make sure you follow Qué Golazo Pod on social media. Leave a review. 5 stars. Luis really goes hard, and he gave us the keys to the castle for this. So that's even more reason to leave a nice review. And we'll throw this one back to Luis to close this one out. But we appreciate you guys having us, and we'll see you guys throughout the tournament.
Later.
Hey, everybody. I want to thank Heath Pearce, Jimmy Conrad for taking care of the Gold Cup preview. Please don't forget to vote for us on the People's Podcast Choice Awards. You can follow all the information on Twitter, Qué Golazo Pod, as well as, of course, the description in Apple Podcasts and so much more. We're right there. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and CBS Sports and your CBS Sports app. Have a great, great rest of your day.